Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. With the voice, Milt Thompson. Delivering the best of sports programming. Interviews with top celebrities. And the answer to the question, where are they now? And now, Milt Thompson, Playing for Keeps.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, right here on WHMB Channel 40. Every Friday night, the best in sports programming, not only here in Central Indiana, but around our globe. And we have had some spectacular guests. And we want to thank, obviously, all of you for letting us know about it. And some of you said, we saw your face on a billboard. I said, okay, that's got to be crazy. I don't want to see my face on a billboard. But they get to see me on TV talking to some of the better looking players and people that we have. And we have one of these guys here today. We're going to give you a really special treat. We're going to do a couple of this month, Where Are They Now segments. And this is going to be done with an invincible guy. And you might have to call him my second voice, but he's an invincible one. And we'll be able to talk with him about his stellar career that has led him all the way from UCLA to the Indianapolis Colts, to a post-career that's engaged, and you see him. You'll notice him right away when he comes on the screen. You'll recognize him as the invincible Charles Arbuckle, who obviously was a tight end here for the Colts, and came along during an era when sometimes the great players and not great teams, but was able to turn some of those heads around and make a living and a life for himself. And what else is he doing in a career that is obviously exciting? And a lot of people say, well, how do I get to talk about sports and be around sports? But there's got to be something more in life, right? So what really makes Charles Arbuckle tick? We knew what he could do on the field. We see what he's doing now off of the field. But there's got to be something more to that than just talking at you. He's going to be talking with us, and we're going to take a short break and come back and talk with Charles Arbuckle right after these important words.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
And welcome back to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, right here on WHMB Channel 40. We've got the invincible one with us today. And I didn't explain to him quite, but everyone gets a nickname from me, whether it sticks or keeps, and doesn't matter. But it always has something to do with our past. And we have the invincible one here on Playing for Keeps, Charles Arbuckle. Charles, welcome to our show.
Hey, Milt, I appreciate it, man. It's been a long time. I know our paths still cross occasionally, but it's always good to talk to folks from Indy. I come on radio shows there. Met my wife there, and actually UCLA, but she was from Indy, and both of my kids were born there. So I have a real fondness for the town of Indianapolis and the state. They've always treated me well, and that's one thing when you're growing up, you don't appreciate things, but as you go through places, you always have places in your mind where you don't mind coming back for a meal and an adult beverage with a few people there because they always treat you nice.
Well, you ought to be treated nice because you're invincible, man. You had a stellar high school career that led to recruiting magic really around the United States. Tell us about that early on career that got you noticed for big-time D1 football.
Well, it's interesting, Milt. I was more of a baseball player growing up. I mean, I love football. Growing up in Texas, you're born with a ball in the crib, right? You have a football starting right away. But the good thing for me is I was pretty athletic at an early age. I played a lot of different sports. And I didn't play varsity football until I was a junior. But fortunately for me, I had some guys in front of me that were really good players, and our team was really good. I was a sophomore when Thurman Thomas was a senior, and Thurman and I didn't play football together. We actually played basketball together. But I started working out with him and some of the other guys that we had that came through Willow Ridge, which was a really stellar program at the time. And that kind of got us on the map. The guys in front of me allowed me to be seen. So when I started as a junior varsity guy, made some plays, but my junior year really started making some plays. And that's what kind of put me on the map.
Okay, you get on the map, and then all of a sudden, the recruiters are out. And give our viewers here a little sense of the time frame when this was, when you were getting recruited, and so they can kind of compare the times with other players that they may have heard of or known.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. Jeff George was one guy that I was coming out with, 86. There were a lot of guys across the country that I can remember going back in time and looking and seeing that, I was one of the top blue chip guys out of the state of Texas, but also in the nation. And I got recruited by a lot of schools, Notre Dame, UCLA, LSU, Stanford, Miami, and a bunch of other schools. And then I finally kind of whittled it down to 4 or 5. And UCLA was always one of those ones that I liked. I went out there for an AAU basketball tournament my 6th or 7th grade year. I had family out there. So when I got the chance to go back for a recruiting trip and they were getting ready for the Rose Bowl, I can just remember, the trip was good. The guys, we just felt like it was a place you wanted to be for the next 4 years. And I always tell kids now, think of the 4, but you got to think those 40 as well. And sure enough, I got to school there, and as luck would have it, my 2nd year, Troy Aikman ended up playing with us. So I had 2 years with Troy. Probably about 30, 35 guys in that 4-year time frame that I was there that, went on to play, myself included, at some point in the league, whether it was a cup of coffee or played at the highest level. And I think that's what really helped me, even though I got had some injuries in college, it allowed me to really, become a 2-time All-American, become a guy that could make plays, and got a chance to get to the next level
and to live your dream out. Go back to that recruiting process a little bit. Now, we're 16, 17 years old, and we think we're pretty good, and then other people tell us that you're pretty good, and then all of a sudden, you're faced with these decisions that that adults would have difficult time making. And so how do you wrap yourself with the appropriate kind of advice at that young age to help you make a decision amongst all these multitude of options you had?
Well, you had unofficial NIL back then, Milt, if you're thinking about the Southwest Conference, which was really a little dicey. But hey, as a young guy, I got a chance to get recruited by all the Texas schools. I didn't like Texas because Fred Akers was there. I didn't particularly like him and his staff, but I liked the University of Texas. So A&M was more of the ones that I gravitated towards. LSU always recruited Texas hard. So you had some things going on under the table, clearly. But I think the biggest thing for me was to try to figure out, okay, how can I continue to look at that as a youngster thinking, okay, these things are great, but what's going to really help me in the long term? And that's what I think, it was hard to leave the state of Texas because there are a lot of people that thought, hey, you grow up here and you play ball here, you should stay here. And I think that was a mindset. So it was tough because places were flying you out on private jets, helicopters. I mean, you go there and you're being wined and dined. You're some celebrity, 17, I was a young high schooler. So it was impressive, but it was also a little overwhelming. Well, I'll say the least, because
the temptation,
no restrictions on the number of times they can call you. Yeah.
I mean, the temptations just have to be overwhelming, and how do you yield not to those temptations and also look out for you? So did you have high school coaches? Did you have a family or other people that kind of said, hey, let's just take a look at a little different direction at this age?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I had some coaches that were really good. I mean, it was hard to initially navigate because you didn't always know what people's angles were. But fortunately for me, I had some really strong coaches and guys that I knew had my best interests and weren't looking to say, hey, you need to go here because I'm going to get paid off by you going there. And I think that sometimes happens in those situations.
Right.
And I had some other family members that were really good sounding boards that could run cover. I mean, and I'm telling you, the start of my senior year, I don't know if my phone ever stopped ringing because we didn't have voicemail then.
Right.
And, those times you just had to take the phone off the hook.
Exactly.
Because the way they recruited then, I think was better, but it was also more exposure because I had coaches coming to football, basketball, and baseball. they come to work. I mean, I knew when they were there looking at us just to make sure, because I wasn't just myself. We had about 7 or 8 other D1 kids that I played ball with, and then also a few others that ended up going Division 1A or Division 2. So we were really a highly recruited school, and that also just brought more exposure because teams that may not have had a real legitimate shot at you still wanted to know, hey, are you interested in us? And, could you come to school here? The one good story about that, my first recruiting letter came from Grambling State. And I think my mom still has it because it came from the late great Eddie Robinson, who, growing up in Texas, being around HBCUs, that was always one of those that I cherished because, even if I wasn't going to go to school there, it was nice to see a letter coming from Grambling and Eddie Robinson.
Right. Well, the pretty blue uniforms of UCLA, the beautiful palm trees, the sunny, the beautiful people, the pretty cheerleaders, all those things to say, well, I'm going there to play ball, but I also need to go there and get an education. So what kind of held your attention relative to staying on that side? Because you know that on this side of this time frame that we got to utilize something more than just our body, right?
Yeah, well, Milt, I'll say I wasn't the best student when I first got there. I mean, I was a National Honor Society student, but my focus was all over the place. I played early. I didn't redshirt. And I can remember, the first fall and winter quarter, because we were on quarters, I didn't do that poorly. But spring quarter, before spring ball, I really struggled with school because the weather was changing. It was nice, and you didn't have the restrictions of being at practice and being at study hall. So I had to refocus, man, and it was good. I'll commend Coach Donahue for something because not many people knew this story, but I was in a class, and I don't even think I was cheating, but I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing in the class. He got called by the professor because the professor knew most of the football players. And he pulled my coattail early on, and he said, look, I promised your mom I was going to take care of you. He said, now those kind of things, if you need help, we're going to provide that for you. That's your one strike. I'm going to make you work out. I'm going to make you do some things. And that led me to believe that I could trust him, even though I didn't always like his counsel, but I could trust him. And after that, I really started to prosper as a student, got better, knew which classes to take to stay eligible, finished with a history degree, and now I'm actually getting my MBA, all because of those lessons that I learned at UCLA and being in some competitive classes with folks.
The Invincible One got a one-uppins, and then he took advantage of it and got his education, kept on rolling. We're going to talk with more of the Invincible One, Charles Arbuckle, right after we have these short words. We'll be right back.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
And welcome back to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, right here on WHMB Channel 4 every Friday night at 9 p.m. Keep the cards and letters and text messages all rolling in. And because we are going to talk a little bit more with the Invincible One, Charles Arbuckle. Many of you remember him as an Indianapolis Colt. Now many of you listen to him, watch him on television, talking sports. Who gets jobs like that? Well, some of us are not quite as invincible as he, but we are as lucky as he. But the Invincible One, Charles Arbuckle, thanks for sharing a lot of your story there in UCLA. And you got a one-uppins there about we got to get some grades because eventually I may want to go on and get an MBA while I'm still doing other stuff. But what led you from there to football field in the pros?
Yeah, once I got through at UCLA, I was getting recruited. I knew I was going to get drafted. I didn't know where. Ended up getting drafted by the Saints. Was there a year, and then what unfortunately for me, I signed Plan B with Cleveland and got cut after that first year. I was out of ball for a year. I was working out in Austin. The only time other than living at home with my mother was that time. I moved back to Austin, just kind of really got my head right and found opportunities with some guys there that were doing some of the same things of really, just trying to get back in the league. And as luck would have it, got a call from the Colts. The two options I had were New York, the Jets or the Indianapolis Colts. And it was a pretty easy decision. As I said, my wife and her family are from there. And it just, even when I came for the combine, it was cold, it was dreary, but it was something about the town that I like. Blue collar, the people, man, if they like you there, they like you, right? It's no in between. But if you give all you got, they're going to give it back to you. So I ended up coming there. I was 5th on the depth chart. Didn't, wasn't anything promised. And lo and behold, in 92, I was one of the last guys standing, Kerry Cash and I. And, we had a pretty nice year that year and had a 4-year career there just because of, battling and understanding my role. When I got to the league, I was hurt some, so I wasn't always able to play at the highest level that I wanted to, but I always knew if I just gave everything I had, that would keep me in the league and keep me in that career.
Well, Mr. Invincible, the tight end position has really evolved through the years and has really changed, not only in body type, but scheme, XYZ tight ends, and, who's going to be doing what, who's catching the ball, who's blocking some of the time, who's doing the other parts about it. Tell us about that evolution in your time frame and where the game is now with respect to tight end position.
Yeah. Well, Milt, I was pretty fortunate. I played with a couple of guys in college, Homer Smith and Steve Axman, who believed in the tight end position. So they both used tight ends, a lot. And then fortunately, when I got to Indy, Ted Marchibroda, who I don't think gets enough credit for his offensive ingenuity and his ability to understand. Ted was a former quarterback. So he would always tell the tight ends, you guys are our best friend. If you can get open and we get you the ball, it makes it so much easier. Think about his offenses in Buffalo, the K-gun, which he then brought to Indianapolis. And that's why we were so explosive. And he was still calling plays after he left us when he went to Baltimore. So I don't know if he gets enough credit for some of the creativity that he had in those offenses and guys that he coached at the tight end position throughout the years. But I think the tight end went away for a while because when I got to the league, they started thinking we need 6'7", 300-pound guys that couldn't move. And then you started seeing teams saying, no, there's a matchup that we can create because the linebackers got smaller. We were still basketball kind of guys at 6'5", 6'6". But if you could run it and you had any ability, that was a matchup problem for a linebacker or a safety. So I think that's why the evolution of the tight end has really become more prevalent because guys that used to be 6'5", 6'6" will play in the NBA. You got to be 6'10", 6'11". And now you're starting to see these big athletic dudes like Gronk and, Travis Kelce and so many others that have made the tight end position kind of evolve even more than what Shannon did, Shannon Sharp and some of those guys that I played with. So I just think it's just nice to see because it's a matchup problem. You cannot cover a big guy if he can move and can catch and can put his hands on you and put his body in front of you.
Yeah, some of the bigger, more athletic players on a team. Unless you get some left tackle who can run you down, maybe that would be the.
well, it's funny you say that. Ironhead Hayward, who God bless his soul. I know he was in Indy for a little bit, but also I played with him in New Orleans. He always talked about athleticism, and Ironhead was one of the most athletic big guys I'd ever been around. But I would always pride myself on most teams. I was probably one of the better athletes because I could jump, I could run. I had no problem with any of that. And then some guys, you get them on a basketball court, they suck. Well, I actually could play basketball,
exactly.
So I felt like I'm athletic.
Exactly. Well, they did bring along a lot of guys. They went to schools without football programs, and they were power forwards. And the scouts took a look and said, "Yeah, it's going to convert them to a tight end."
Well, the great story there, Milt, one of my best buddies now was Marcus Pollard. And I tell this story all the time. When I saw him the first day he was working out, I'm coming out getting ice. I'm beat up that day, but I see him moving around and I said, that kid is going to be special. And sure enough, when he signed with us, he was really raw, didn't know the game at all. He hadn't played since high school. But I worked with him, really just taught him everything I knew from the tight end position. And to this day, he still thanks me because when you get cut in the NFL, it's not a, hey, I love you, get you a gold watch. When I got released, I gave him all my shoes because he didn't have a shoe contract. I said, hey, look, man, you make the most of this opportunity. And he took the number 81. And, I was so proud of him as he progressed and made plays for the Colts after I left. And I think that's the part you can do. How can you pay it forward a little bit?
Right. So you've been paying it forward in lots of different ways. Then you have a career epiphany after you are no longer able to play professional football. then the question is, what are you going to do now on Where Are They Now?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring it up. Bob Lamey had always would come around and, ask guys for soundbite. And Bob, was always gracious to me. And he said, hey, I think you'd be good at this radio stuff. We have some pre and post game stuff you want to do. And at first I wasn't sure. I was a little bit bitter with football right after. Wasn't sure that I wanted to be around it. But the more I talked to the guys, I could easily relate to the players that were there because we battled together. We bled together. We understood that. So I said, yeah, sure. After about a year, I decided to do that. Started doing some Colts preseason TV, which then led me to some small college. And then that's how I kind of got to ESPN. I was doing a lot of college stuff locally. And after talking to you many years ago, like just trying to find my next career, I remember those conversations you and I would have about that. So I think it was not luck. I think God put me in a place where I could play the game. And I was always a student of the game. And then it gave me a chance to kind of become a teacher of the game. I really like when people are listening to understand or maybe say, hey, I didn't think about that. Because that's what football or any sport can give you. And that's what I've been able to do over the last 20 plus years after my playing career.
Well, the Invincible One found himself transferring from the football playing side of the world to the football analysis time of the world, and giving now what some people call that an X's and O's coach. Others say that, well, that's a motivational coach, or they'll say that one's a scheme coach, or this one here is a Jimmy's and Joe's coach. So in your preparation, not only looking at coaches, but the players and the positions and the change of the game that it's had in the last several years since you've been in the announcer's booth. Tell us about the flow of the game, the change of the game, and where you see the game heading.
Yeah, it's a much faster game. I think, you have kids now. I was watching some video of a high school kid that was like 6'4", 250, running a 10, 400 meters. And he looked like a man running with little children, but he was that explosive. I think the big thing, though, is that the game can only change to a certain degree. It's still blocking, tackling, and execution and fundamentals. So, I watch a lot of film. I think that's what helps me because you have to slow the game down and know what each team is doing. So, prime example, I have the North Carolina State spring game. I'll watch film from last year because I know they still have some guys back. The schemes haven't changed, so now it gives me a chance to really understand when they have some wrinkles and they're doing different things. But what it allows you to do is just kind of constantly understand what coaches are doing, what coaches are kind of creating new things. Lincoln Riley is a good example. I always liked his offenses at Oklahoma. I think he's going to do the same thing at USC. But I think the biggest thing is how do you execute within the scheme of what you're trying to run? Whether it's a spread offense with power or if it's a spread where you really want to just throw the ball all over the yard. And then defensively, I was at North Carolina watching their spring practice last week and really looking more at defense because that's where they struggled last year. And Gene Chizik, who's won a national championship as a head coach, is now the D coordinator. So spending time there, just really dissecting what they're doing in space, how their alignment are attacking and doing different things.
Well, that's what the Invincible One is doing now. That's where he is now. You can watch him, just turn on any television show that talks about football, and you'll find our Invincible Charles Arbuckle. Thank you so much for taking time with us. So good to see you again, and stay blessed, my friend. And people will come right back here, and they're going to watch Playing for Keeps this time next week, next Friday. I am your host, The Voice, Milt Thompson. See you next week.